figured I'd capture a little video. We're putting on the first strip, and this is following the shear line. The Petrel play here that I'm building, this is a 16-foot Petrel play, has a lot of curvature to the shear, and the shear is the separation between the hull and the deck, and there's a bit of an angle between the hull and the deck. At least at the ends. Near the middle it's more of a rounded shear and there's not much angle there, but here at the ends there's quite a bit. I've got all these little sticks clamped on to the forms, and those describe the angle between the deck and the hull. So I'm actually bisecting the angle. So you have an angle like that, a bisection is halfway in between. So the angle up here is a little bit more open, so it's something like that. But on my forms I've got a mark describing that angle right at the shear line. So this first strip, I want to have this bottom edge match that angle, more or less. I'm going to strip this whole hull, sand and fiberglass, do the same thing to the deck, creating a matching strip on the other side here. But then eventually I'm going to actually mate the two together, and that will be in a couple weeks from now at the soonest. And there's a lot happening in between now and then. And one of the things that's going to happen is going to be fiberglass and epoxy, but on the inside and the outside of these strips, a whole surface here is going to be fiberglass, and the epoxy is going to drip down that edge. And this edge here will be presumably raw wood with fiberglass on either side, but that edge being raw wood. But there will have been fiberglass and there will have been epoxy dripping down there. So I'm going to have to clean that edge up anyways. This is a long way of saying this first angle we're making here is just an approximation. We're going to have plenty of time to fix it up later, but we're trying to get it so as we're putting this together, it's a relatively tight fit. So we're just sort of eyeballing it at this point. So the first thing I did was just dry fit this strip in place just to figure out where it's going to lie. And in order to get enough length all the way down at that end, I've got to move the strip this way a little bit just to make sure it's hanging over the end. And then I made a little mark here. You can't see it probably in the video, but I just marked 2. This is form 1, form 2. So I've got a number 2 there, number 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down there. And those are just so I can quickly take this strip and chuck it back into place, see how I'm doing. So here, it doesn't really show up there very well, but I've already got a pretty, a decent fit up against that strip. So the bottom angle of this is matching this little stick I clamped in place. And so now I'm looking back here. This one looks pretty good. By the time I get back here, I haven't planed back here at all. So I'm just looking at the angle between this stick of wood here and the bottom of the strip. And I'm looking at what is the size of that gap right there. And then I'm going to take my plane, I'm going to hold the strip here, and I'm just going to match that gap. So the gap that I see right here, I want to see a similar gap between the edge of my plane, which is essentially mimicking the angle of this little stick right there, and the strip. So I just hold that there, and then I start planing away. This is a narrow floppy strip. It can sometimes be hard to get the plane to cut. You see how the strip is hanging down this way? If I put the plane up against it, it means this drooping stick is touching at the heel of the plane, at the toe of the plane, and not really touching at the blade, just in its natural form. So if I go ahead and do this, now I'm arcing the stick so the blade's actually able to catch a little bit of purchase on the strip, the edge of the strip there. So just, that's sort of a non-obvious thing. If you're doing this and things aren't cutting, just the droop of that stick is enough to keep it from cutting. So just by pressing this down against something, so now it's bent the other way. Now the blade actually purchases a little bit on that stick. The other thing is I have this little bench I've set up just on 2x4 across my strong back. And so it's just a place I can put stuff down and work on. And this is a long floppy strip. As I start to work my way down here, it's going to be harder to deal with. So just as a little bit of something to hold the strip in place as I'm doing my work here. I put some clamps right there. I'm going to just check my progress. It's looking pretty good there. A little bit of a gap here at form number 5. Now, again, I'm bending my strip down. These little clamps here make it so the strip is contained. As it gets towards the middle of the boat, there's a lot less beveling needed, so I can move more quickly. And so number 3 is right there, 5. Form 7 here, and then by the middle of the boat, you're form 8, 9, 10, 11. 11, we're starting to get a little bit of an angle there. Alright. There's a number of ways dealing with these long floppy strips. You can sort of keep them contained. I've got these on my little workbench. I'll put a clamp right there. If I drop the strip in there, now they're down at this end. That's staying under control, and I can just check my ankles here. Ever so slight bevel along this section. And here, again, I'm bending this, intentionally bending the strip out this way, just getting a little bit of pressure against that clamp down there to get a little bit of curvature away from the base of the blade. So I know I get good purchase on that blade. And as long as this blade is pretty sharp, fine shavings like that, you know you're doing good. If you're having trouble getting the plane to make nice shavings, trying to get nice shavings, the instinct you're going to have is to try and crank this blade out. You find the strip's not cutting, or you find the blade's not cutting, you're gonna think, oh, I just don't have enough blade showing here. And that's rarely the problem. As long as the blade is sharp, it's gonna cut with just a little bit sticking out. And yeah, you'll need to make more passes with the plane, but you want it just sticking out. If you start to crank the blade in there, see if we can get it to sharpen. See, there's just a little bit of a gap there. I start turning this adjustment and that gap closes up. And you think, okay, the blade's sticking out more, it's gonna cut more. That's awesome, that's great, that's what I wanted to do, you think. But if I then take a strip, so you see what's happened there? I've got a little bit of piece of wood jammed in there. The blade is so close to the front of the gap there that the thickness of the shaving that I'm making, which is thicker because I've pushed the blade out, that shaving can't get through that gap anymore. So if you're having trouble cutting and you think, oh, the blade is dull, look at what's happening in there. Make sure you're not just jamming shavings into that gap. And so you want to take then back that blade out a little bit, make it so there's room to get through. And then when you make cuts here, so right now it's not cutting at all, I've got good pressure, it's just barely shaving. So I'm going to just turn this, get rid of the backlash, turn it just a skosh, another skosh. Okay, now I'm getting nice fine shaving. So I'm like turning it a 1/16 of a revolution there. I'm barely turning it, just getting it in, and try it with just a handy piece of wood to see if it's making a cut. You might find, okay, that shaving right there is really fine. It's not taking much wood off. Maybe I want to go a little bit farther, be a little bit more aggressive. So another little tiny turn. Okay, now we're starting to remove some wood. But again, it's tiny little turns here. Don't just give it a couple twists thinking that's what I need. We're just dialing it in ever so slightly. And if you start to get stuff jamming in there, you know you've gone too far, back it off a little bit of a turn. So as we're getting down towards the end here, the stern here is like a bow. If you look at this strip here and the angle of this little stick relative to the bottom of this, and then this one here, this is at a much steeper angle there. So what's the consequence of that as far as how much wood you need to remove? If you're just cutting a little bit off at a slight bevel versus a steep bevel, which one requires you remove more wood? Well, the steep bevel is going to remove more wood. So what's that mean as far as how long it's going to take to do planing? If you're moving more wood, you're going to have to do more planing. So each pass of the plane, we've adjusted it really fine, so each pass is cutting a little sliver off. The amount of wood we remove is sort of proportional to how many swipes of the plane we have. So down at the far end, where there's a steep bevel, it's going to take me long. Hard to see down here, but I'm working on just this tiny little end here. I don't have a lot of overhang. So in order to get this in, it's hard to get nice passes if I'm starting this way, going onto the wood. It's easier to hold it this way, so I've got a little bit of support on my arm there, and I'm holding this beyond the plane. Now the plane is coming off the end of this strip. So I'm pulling the plane, it's coming towards me, cutting towards me, as opposed to pushing the plane. Looking close enough. Again, I'm not trying to make this perfection, I'm just trying to eyeball it in there and get the gross fit about right, because when we're done with all the fiberglassing, we're going to clean up that edge, planing it some more, and we'll have the deck and hull both essentially finished, and we'll be able to join them together and actually see how tight a joint we've got. So this one is about ready to install.